Oh man, this Antarctic cruise sucks. I was told there were supposed to be a whole bunch of penguins and seals, but the only thing I've gotten is a bunch of dudes in scuba suits and Pinnacle members. Oh, hey everyone, and welcome to Group Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderlycone, and in this episode, we're going to be building the USS Midway from the Metal Earth Premium Series collection and telling you everything you need to know to get it built correctly, like what are the tricky bits, how those jets and side details go on, and what tools do you need to build an aircraft carrier? These are all great questions. We're going to get the answers. Let's go back in time to where I was just opening this package up so you can see how this whole thing started while I deal with some Pinnacle members. Going to models. It's not Margarito, it's Margarita. And I see that we're already building the USS Midway. You guys are doing really well here, moving along quite fast. Well, before we get too far along, we need to talk about the tools you're going to need to be able to build this build, especially with all of its small details. Starting off with a good pair of nippers. These guys right here are perfect for cutting out all of our pieces from their sheets and ensuring that most, if not all, the metal gets off of our part. You don't want to have any little bits of metal left over because when it comes to folding all of our pieces, those little bits of metal will get in the way. Good pair of flush cutters or nippers will make sure that these guys are as clean as possible. Next, I highly recommend some tweezers to be able to form all of our pieces and also help you guide them into their different slots. I found with the USS Midway that there were a lot of holes that actually had paint in them, making the tabs in there that much harder. If you have a good pair of tweezers, you can actually go into those holes, clean them out a little bit, making the whole process a lot easier. Highly recommend a good pair of tweezers. Next up, a pair of pliers is always a good thing to have when it comes to building these kits because they are great for forming some of the bigger pieces and also some of the flat pieces that we're going to have to form, especially around the propellers and those side details. These guys have definitely converted me over the last couple of builds because they're a lot easier to form some of those smaller details than using tweezers. Who would have thought? Next on the list, I highly recommend getting yourself a couple of dapping punches. These are great for adding 3D details as well as getting dome shapes and cylinder shapes when you need them. With this particular kit, we're not doing too many domes and we're not doing too many cylinders, but using it for 3D details like on our sides and back is a great option. I highly recommend a good set of dapping punches, but if you don't have them, you can always run upstairs to your kitchen and grab yourself a nice spoon. It works just as well. Now, as always, these are just our suggestions, and you really don't need anything but nippers and tweezers to get the job done. But of course, having all these extra tools will make your life a lot easier, especially when it comes to bending some of these smaller details. All right, let's get to the build. I see we've already made quite a bit of progress, and those first couple of pieces are really all kind of the same. They're all just little tiny boxes, and boxes are some of the easiest things for us to be able to bend in 3D metal model making. It really just comes down to making sure that all of our sides are perfectly lined up, so there's no gaps. Gaps do not make our models look good, so we always want to make sure everything is really nice and sharp before attaching it onto this main piece. And as we add the pieces on, being careful not to accidentally bend them out of shape once they're in place. It's actually a lot easier to do in this little control center area than any other place on the ship, with the exception of maybe the propellers. But this right here is definitely a part that you want to handle with care. You don't want to have this part break and ruin the whole build before we even get started. That's especially true here for part 14. This is something I'm going to call the command center. And what we have to do is be able to place this on this little part here and then bend it over, which initially isn't entirely too hard. But because there is some etching here and we do have to do a little bit of bending, that piece is extremely weak. I highly recommend only bending this once or twice. Otherwise, yeah, you're gonna have it break just like I did. Now, this can easily be fixed with a little bit of UV glue, but I hate using glue when it comes to these builds. I always feel like that's a really bad thing to do. So to avoid this, just make sure you take your time and really think about how this is supposed to be bent before bending it. That way you don't run the risk of doing what I just did. Jets, jets, and more jets. Now this part is actually quite easy. All we're doing is just bending all of our different jets and planes and then placing them onto the Midway runway. Where things get a little bit more complicated is that you need to make sure that the right planes go in the right space. With this kit, I made sure to organize my planes into different groups, and that way when I went to place them on the runway, I didn't get confused. Also, as you bend these, you'll notice that the tabs are not straight. They're actually a little bit slanted. That's completely okay. All of our holes are slanted, and if you straighten these things up, you're going to have a bit of a hard time putting them in place. Not that I have any experience with that. And yes, I did lose one jet, but that's not that big of a deal when you think about it. The US government's lost many of them, and I've only ever lost one. So there you go. Part 29 for our hull. With this particular piece, I used my dapping set to get a good basic understanding of what I was looking for in the piece. Then I used my thumbs to kind of really round it out and get that fine detail that I needed. Once I thought everything was in the right place, I then bent all of my tabs and grabbed part 30 and see if it all lined up. Now, part 30 is a great way to see if everything you've done so far is in the right shape. And once we put the bottom on, you'll kind of get a good idea if you need to bend part 29 a little bit more. Let's see how it works out. Okay, part 37. Now with this particular piece, you might feel the need to actually attach the main flat piece there first before going to that little kind of T section, if you will. I highly recommend doing the opposite. Put that T into place first because I found that spot to be extremely weak and easy to break. And I accidentally broke mine again. But luckily, in this particular case, I did not need to use glue because of how this whole thing was already shaped. It actually matches up really well, and you can't even tell that I broke it on my particular kit. But I don't want you guys breaking pieces. I don't want you using glue. So instead, go ahead and attach that little T section first. Get that really nice bend with your thumb, and then once you get all that in place, then attach the lower section. That would kind of be like the icing on the cake, if you will, after getting through this little hard piece. This way, you don't run the risk of breaking this piece like I did. Step 6, the small part gauntlet. This is where we gotta take all these little tiny fragile details and place them onto the USS Midway. For the most part, they're not too difficult to build. They're mainly just boxes. But where it gets difficult is actually placing them onto the USS Midway. Not only are the parts really fragile, but the actual insertion holes themselves have a whole bunch of paint inside, making the actual insertion of the tabs nearly impossible. I highly recommend using a pair of tweezers to help you place these in place, and if you need to, clean out the insertion holes so you can put the tabs into their proper place. If you put too much pressure on these, they will flatten the details and everything will be ruined. So just take your time here. If you're placing a part into its space and it's not going in, it might just be the paint blocking you from going through. Clean it out and everything should be okay. All right, let's see what's up next. Ha! I told you that was a lot of small details, but now that we're through that little gauntlet, it's time to actually put our two halves together. And when we go to do this, you might notice that some of your tabs are underneath the jets, making them almost impossible to get to. Yeah, I know, it was very difficult, but I actually used a combination of my tweezers, pliers, and tap bending tools to be able to get these as secured as possible. And if you find that your ship is kind of popping out or kind of pushing away, go ahead and give it a little bit of a squeeze. Not too much, just a little bit of a squeeze, and this will kind of help get everything in the right place. Again, take another look at the bottom here. Does it have a whole bunch of gaps? If it does have some gaps, kind of bend those out a little bit. Work it out to make sure everything is kind of nice and straight before attaching that top piece on. This way, you're not fighting to put the tabs in place. They almost just kind of go there naturally. And if you have that happen, you know that you're on the right way. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up this build. And boom, there we have it, the Middle Earth Premium Series USS Midway in all of its glory. This build was quite tricky, wasn't it, with all of its little tiny details, especially with the side and top here. I can't believe I broke apart. I mean, I try so hard in every single one of my videos not to break the pieces, but it looks like the last couple of builds, I'm just breaking things. It might be because the metal is a little bit different, or it could just be because of all the laser etching that's attributed with it. But whatever it is, it's just a real bummer when we break pieces. I'm really glad to be able to use UV glue. It seems like a good solution to take care of some of our broken pieces without it standing out too much. As you can see, my guy here looks pretty good. I need to actually straighten it out a little bit before I take my pictures, but that can all be done with some small little bits of work with these tweezers right here. And that's one thing I'm going to have to highly recommend for this build, is making sure that you have the proper tools to be able to get these really tiny details bent. I can't imagine trying to bend these with normal tweezers. I think that I would have had a really hard time trying to get those really nice 90-degree bends. This is a build not necessarily for beginners, but definitely for people that have actually had a couple models under the belt already, or for experienced builders that are looking for a model that's going to take a little bit to put together because of all of the repeat details. I mean, this is not the hardest 3D metal model out there when it comes to repeat details, but it's definitely one of them when it comes to placing these jets in the right place. I can't tell you how happy I was when I found that jet that we were missing. It really does kind of pull the whole thing together, and although it may have been historically accurate because the Midway did have to dump some of its planes one time to be able to have a visitor come, I still think that having just one missing would have been a little bit weird. Overall, I highly recommend this model for any builders out there that have a little bit of experience and are looking to add another ship to their fleet. The USS Midway will not have you disappointed. It really does look good in the end, and I think that the different bits that we have to put together are great practice for some of the other harder models out there. Did you build the USS Midway with me? Let me know in the comments down below how hard it was for you. Did you break any pieces? I would love to know. And if you're new here, go ahead and press subscribe. There's going to be all kinds of really cool projects coming on in the future, and I would love to have you there. Thank you so much to Metal Earth for sending me the USS Midway for me to review. These guys are awesome. They never asked to look at my videos before putting them out there, and they are really supportive of the channel. So thank you so much to Metal Earth again for sending me this to check out. Until next time, Groovers, keep building. All right, now we're going to work on some stabilization things with you because the beginning was way too rocky.